Hey, this is Jeff from Evans Tuning. In this video, I'm going to talk about a lot of key things that you need to know about performance and S2000s. So if you have a naturally aspirated S2000 and you want to have it tuned, I get a lot of questions, what do I need to do? What's going to give me the best horsepower per dollar spent? So on an S2000, the two things that in my eyes are critical are a test pipe and an intake. There's several different intake designs that work pretty good. K&N, AEM, Engine, they're all good brands. K&N being a short ram hybrid long, cold air style. The AEM and Engine being cold air style. Some people don't like cold air, so there's the two to pick from. In test pipes, there's Burke, there's Megan Racing, there's, you kind of take your pick. Everybody kind of makes a test pipe. The brand necessarily doesn't matter. I think Burke has a little bit higher quality, but the two things, the intake and the test pipe, will give you the best horsepower per dollar spent along with a custom tune. So typical gains with those two mods and a custom tune are 20 to 30 foot-pounds of mid-range torque gain and anywhere from 10 to 20 horsepower high RPM. So you can do headers, you can do exhaust, but you're going to spend a lot more money for little to no gains and a lot more sound in some cases. So if you have a supercharged S2000, I recommend keeping boost around 12 psi for 91 octane, no higher than 14 to 15 for 93 octane. You can run more boost, but what happens is you have to decrease the ignition timing to keep knock levels in check, which essentially gives you the same power on 18 pounds as you would have made on 14 pounds, to keep the thing from not blowing up. So, if you were going to run ethanol or race gas with a supercharger, run, the highest pulley that you can get without getting belt slip or overspinning the blower. So, you should be able to get the maximum, blower speed or maximum PSI level from the manufacturer of the supercharger. What's safe. But if you're in that situation, want to run as much as you can to get as much power as you can. So if you have a supercharged S2000, one of the things I get a lot of questions on is what header, what exhaust should I run? Keep the stock header, keep the stock exhaust. If you're looking for performance gain, there is little to none doing headers and exhaust. I've done back-to-back testing, and I have not seen, especially a header, perform over the OEM header. The one thing I can tell you you're going to need to do, or I recommend to do, is either have a high flow cat or a test pipe. Test pipe being preferable, the high flow or a stock cats actually will brick or solidify over time, and then you can have all kinds of power loss issues and knock issues. So if you're gonna spend the money, do a test pipe, leave the stock header, leave the stock exhaust, and install the blower, and you'll be fine. So if you have a forced induction S2000, whether it's turbo and whether it's supercharged or even a nitrous, one thing that I highly recommend you do, especially before bringing it in for tuning, is upgrading the stock clutch. Stock clutch may be able to hold 5 or 6 pounds on a supercharger, and that's maybe because I've seen them slip still. So you want to upgrade it. There's a whole, depending on what power level and everything you're running, there's tons of choices. What we have found to be kind of the best overall balance of drivability, pedal feel, and everything, ACT pressure plate, OEM disc, and the AP1 flywheel seems to be preferable for most S2000 owners. Competition clutch makes some good clutches. Science of Speed makes some good clutches. So it just depends, on personal preference. But we highly recommend you doing a clutch upgrade because the last thing you want to do is have your clutch slip if you come bringing it for a custom tune. So if you have a turbo S2000, I highly recommend doing a tubular style exhaust manifold. The S2000 is an extremely efficient engine. It's unlike I think most any four-cylinder other than maybe a K series or a B series, but they do not tolerate high back pressure. So if you have a clogged cat or if you have a a log manifold on a turbocharged setup or a very small exhaust on a turbocharged setup, you're almost guaranteed to lose a huge amount of power. So if you're planning on doing forced induction route, you're planning on doing turbocharging, there's tons of quality tubular kits out there. Full race being our personal choice. There's others, Sheepy, Inline Pro. There's several other companies that make quality tubular style exhaust manifold kits that you'll get huge gains in comparison to a log manifold. We have seen 100 horsepower more just by going from a log to a tubular style manifold, as well as lowering the knock sensitivity for the motor, so you'll actually make more power, and the engine will be less prone to knock on the same octane level, producing more power. So it's very beneficial to do a tubular manifold, for engine longevity and for power. So if you have a forced induction S2000, whether it's supercharged or turbocharged, you need to do at least one step colder spark plug. You want to do this. The colder spark plug will help prevent pre-ignition, which can lead to knock. So there's many different spark plug choices out there. We recommend NGK, and specifically the Iridium, the BKR AEIX spark plug is what we found to work the best in S2000s. You may need a colder spark plug, so you may need two-step colder spark plug depending on your power level. The Iridium 8s, the BKR 8 plugs I just mentioned, they're typically good for 600 to 700 horsepower. Any higher than that, then you can step up to a heat range 9, being 2 steps colder. So you want to do colder spark plugs depending on your power level and application before you get a tuning done. So if you have a forced induction S2000, supercharger, turbocharged, the OEM coils are typically good for a lot of power. We've ran into some situations where the coils either have a lot of mileage on them, or let's say the charging system in the car may be not as great, and they don't get as much battery voltage. There's different upgrades on the market for ignition coils. What we have found to work the best is OEM K20 coils from an 06 Plus Civic Si. They're a drop-in coil. They cost under $300 from the dealer for all 4, brand new. And we actually run those coils in our drag race white S2000 that we have, and we're making over 1,200 horsepower on that. So if you need to upgrade your coil, don't look to the aftermarket. Buy OEM Honda, buy OEM K20 specific coils from a 8th gen Civic Si. So if you have a forced induction S2000, you're going to need to upgrade the fuel pump. We've installed, I think, every fuel pump on the market that would be a drop-in for an S2000. If you have anything larger than a Walbro 255, you're going to need to rewire the fuel pump. So if you have an Aeromotive 340, the AEM E85 pump, the Walbro 400, the Walbro 450, any of those larger size pumps, they draw much more amperage than what the OEM wiring can provide. So what you need to do is rewire the fuel pump. Science of Speed sells a nice, complete fuel pump rewiring kit that allows to run these bigger pumps and sufficiently feed them enough amperage so they perform as they're advertised. And from my personal opinion, Walbro is the most reliable pump that I have worked with. The 255 is a drop-in, so I have rewired them and I've seen good results, and most of the cars that we build in-house here or have in the past, we do the 255 drop-ins for anything under 500 horsepower, and they're literally a plug-and-play fuel pump. So if you're looking for a recommendation for a fuel pump and what you should kind of be looking at, under 500 horsepower, a Walbro 255 is great. If you're looking for more than that, I would look into the Walbro 400 or 450, but you need to note that they need to be rewired, and Science of Speed sells a great rewiring kit. So one of the pitfalls of the S2000s is the Banjo Bolts, the oil squirter Banjo Bolt that goes in the bottom of the block for the oil squirter that squirts oil to the bottom side of the piston. So from 2000 to sometime in early 2003, Honda had a particular Banjo Bolt that they were using, and it didn't provide enough oil to the cylinder wall. And what would happen is typically number 4 cylinder, would actually starve of oil, and you'd get piston scuffing, and then the engine would need to rebuild. This was actually a huge issue over in Europe. I guess a lot of the guys drive their S2000s really fast on the Autobahn, so this problem actually presented itself much quicker, I guess, than in the U.S. market, and that had to be addressed. So I think midway through 2003 and on, Honda had a different oil banjo bolt design. So if you are in, from a 2000 to sometime early 2003, you can check your VIN number to see kind of where your VIN lies. You should think about upgrading your banjo bolt. We have seen engine failures, piston scuffing on stock S2000s, and we have seen a lot more failures happen when you supercharge or turbo them. So it's something to keep in mind, and if it happens, you're going to require an engine rebuild. You can get the banjo bolts for $10, $20 a piece, and it takes a few hours to put them in, but it's well worth the investment to not have to worry about this being a potential problem with your engine. So one of the pitfalls of the AP1 S2000 engines, the F20C, is the valve spring retainer can crack. Honda redesigned the retainer in 2004 and newer, which is the AP2, and they changed the thickness and the material of the retainer so it's less prone to cracking. So it doesn't, it's not a guarantee that it's going to crack, but the AP1s are notorious for cracking. You can actually inspect the retainers to see if you have hairline crack starting. If you do, you definitely want to get them changed. Either way, for peace of mind, I recommend getting them changed. The retainers are relatively inexpensive from Honda, and the procedure, is a few hours from a qualified mechanic to get them changed. But it'll give you peace of mind that you're not going to drop a valve and potentially destroy the engine, over a couple dollar retainer. So I have a lot of emails and phone calls about what gauges should I run in my S2000. This is a very, very common question. The two most critical gauges, and this kind of goes for any car in general if you're going to put gauges in your car, oil pressure and wideband air fuel. Those two can tell you a lot of information and give you, critical data if something's going wrong that you can see immediately, and you can either stop driving your car or take it to a tuner if there's an issue. So if you're looking for gauges, wideband air fuel, oil pressure are the two that I recommend first before anything else.